there was a point where I had to make a decision and say, like, whatever measures we need to take, let's do it. So we took the extra measure to get the biopsy, the extra measure, to do all those. And I think that's really, for me, I needed a peace of mind. I needed that. And I kept thinking, like, my father did it for us. Not that I wouldn't have done the same, but what that planted in me was I owe it to the rest of my family to turn over every rock.
I don't think it's always because we are fearful, and Black people could be the African in us. We are innately spiritual, even if we're not overly religious. We walk, that's not just swagger. We are walking to the beat of a spiritual drum.
Today we're going to have a conversation, and this conversation is going to be about an issue that's really affecting Black men today. According to the American Cancer Society, Black men are 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with prostate cancer. When I got that diagnosis, I don't know about you and Alan and Tony, but, I didn't know. I didn't know what that meant. I was nervous. I was thinking of my family as well.
My name is Dr. Tavia Benjamin. I am a urologist. I'm chief of urology at Glen Cove Hospital. I think that the burden and the weight of the diagnosis is significant, and I think that being able to use that knowledge in a way to help alleviate fears, help create a roadmap, a plan, and hope.
There was the obvious question, is there a fundamental difference between different communities, different ethnicities? The differences were never as stark as the actual outcomes that you just mentioned, twice as likely. And so what they actually saw that they did slightly better, which starts to suggest that the healthcare system and the access to healthcare are a major, major driving factor between these differences.
Like Tony said, you demanded kind of that extra level, and I think that's what we have to do, right? We have to be very assertive and aggressive with our care.
It's a complicated topic because, in medical school we're taught that eventually all men will die of prostate cancer. But, Black men are a high-risk group. And the PSA, which is very important, I think, to get measured, there's no set point at which, it hits this number and you better get checked out. It's more the trend and the changes. But you won't know that unless you check it out.
I asked my doctor, what's going on with that? And she says, at your age, it fluctuates. And I said, well, doesn't fluctuate mean up and down? It's only going up. So I demanded to see a specialist. And then they did the physical, biopsy, bingo, I had it. And the doctor's talking, it was like Charlie Brown. All you heard was wah, wah, wah. My wife is writing everything down. And so when I left, it was like a fog. But she guided me and gave me that strength, and God bless her, because I don't think the outcome would have been the same if I was by myself.
Call this the unspoken truth.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I am Dr. William O, and I'm chair of the American Cancer Society's National Prostate Cancer Roundtable. I'm also director of precision medicine for the Yale Cancer Center and Smilow Cancer Hospital in Connecticut. We're here to talk about the importance of having candid conversations about prostate cancer, especially in the Black community. The video trailer we just saw is entitled The Unspoken Truth, a dialogue on prostate cancer among Black men, and it gives us a preview of the efforts to make this happen. This video was filmed at the American Cancer Society Hope Lodge in New York City in late August this past summer. And the project was really born out of an urgent need to address the glaring health disparities faced by Black men in the United States regarding prostate cancer. Joining me today is Mitch Cornet, Vice President, Community Strategic Partnerships at Northwell Health, the moderator in the video and a prostate cancer survivor himself, and Richard LaRochelle, Senior Advisor for Operations of the Office of Community Wellness and Population Health, also at Northwell Health, and the video's producer. Mitch and Richard, along with the American Cancer Society's Long Island, New York team, worked in collaboration on this really important and impressive project. Mitch, let's start with you. First of all, it was really wonderful to watch the video and to see that your cancer journey is behind you and that you're sharing your story. What feedback are you hearing from the community and from others about your shared journey on this prostate cancer story?
Well, for me, it's been really great. The community has come up. A lot of men have come up and actually say thank you. They really didn't think about what's going on with themselves in terms of their own health, and that the video really actually gave them sort of a focus on just thinking about themselves. I think the other thing that was very interesting is a lot of women have come up to me also. When you think about it, women, it's either a husband, a brother, a father, and we were able to give them some things to think about, when they're looking at that group and saying, if they're noticing something different, it gives them some type of empowerment to be able to have those conversations with that person. And then, I think the other thing that was actually very interesting is some men who, actually didn't think about getting themselves checked and did get themselves checked and then wind up realizing that they did have prostate cancer. And thanking me, for saying, you inspired me to go get checked. And lo and behold, I got it early, and I think that's the other piece, to be able to get it early so that you have treatment options. And I think that was, to me, that's been the best part about this work that we've been doing.
Yeah, it must be great to feel the impact that your video has and kind of sharing information that a lot of people are not aware of. And I think your point about the women in these men's lives is really important, because it's not just a man by himself, it's really the community around him, including the people who really love him. Richard, I want to get to you here. Thank you for producing this really beautiful video.
Yeah.
You captured so many candid conversations. We could feel this group of men speaking to each other with lots of different backgrounds. You had panelists from science, from medicine, the clergy, the nonprofit sector, and a professional sports star. What was your vision, and what did you hope to accomplish when you were producing this video?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. One of the first things, that I thought of when putting this video together was that, I know the video needed to be powerful. I know it needed to be personal and accessible. Obviously, we all know that prostate cancer disproportionately impacts Black men. So I wanted to bring different voices that not only had expertise, but also brought in their authenticity, their credibility, and connection. So, a physician may talk about, the science and the screening. A faith leader can talk about the, stigma and trust. A survivor like Mitch talked about his lived experiences. So my vision was to create something real, something that felt like you were sitting in a barbershop or with your family having this discussion. So I wanted viewers to be able to see themselves, and have them reflected in the panel and leave with only two things, information and inspiration. And I feel like we accomplished that.
That's really wonderful. I think that's right. And I think
can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, and I've had the opportunity to watch people watch the video, and to Richard's point, when you see the audience nodding their heads as the speakers are talking, then it's actually hitting home. So I think Richard's vision of really hitting home for people was quite glaring. I mean, no matter where you go, you start to hear those words coming out of Allen Houston's mouth, and then all of a sudden you see those heads nodding up and down. It really, for me, highlighted the fact that what Richard was hoping to happen actually did happen.
Yeah, that's really great insight. Just for the audience, we will be taking questions, so make sure to put those in the chat, and we will be answering some of your direct questions. But I do think that the point of addressing the audience by having a mixture of expertise and personal experience really made the video particularly impactful. Also, the 30 minutes, I think, people are really busy. They don't have time to sit around for 2 hours to hear all about the anatomy of the prostate, like a doctor may be lecturing to them. This is really
Right.
about getting to the heart of the matter. And so I really appreciated how you put that together. And you also used a word, Richard, called, you said authenticity. And I think that that's really important to somebody listening to this, because they want to really hear the stories of how it impacted people, and so that they can impact their own lives. So I want to highlight one of the sound bites, which talks a little bit about this authenticity and about the heartfelt stories that we hear in this. So let's run that first sound bite.
I was 60 pounds heavier than I am now. And my doctor said, look, you have 3 beautiful girls. I'm assuming you want to walk them down the aisle. Well, if you keep in this pathway, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to your point, go ahead and begin to start, looking at my diet and start working out. And it was really just coming back from my next annual when they took the PSA, and it was so high. It was like 6 point something. And so, I think that's a major factor that, Black men in general don't really look out for their own health.
That's a very powerful statement, Mitch. And I just want to reiterate something that we saw in the trailer to the video, which is Black men in the United States have twice the risk of getting prostate cancer. And in addition, they also have a much higher rate of dying of the disease. So we know that guidelines really focus on the idea that Black men in particular in the United States should be screened earlier. So tell me, both of you really, but why are some men not getting screened for prostate cancer? You want to start, Mitch?
Yeah, I think there are a few reasons. I think one is time. A lot of time Black men are the workers of the family, and they're constantly working, and so they don't think about themselves in terms of their health. They're thinking about their family, thinking about putting food on the table, and so sometimes I think that's the one piece. I think the other piece has a lot to do with the stigma, and going through that, screening, not realizing, it's a lot different than before, where you had to bend over and I think that vulnerability part is always an issue for Black men, and so they try to avoid that because they avoid those issues, not realizing the PSA is the earmark of getting some information about where your prostate is, and so I do think those are 2 areas that is a challenge. And the other thing is because they don't feel anything is wrong. They don't understand that you can have no symptoms and have prostate cancer, which was me. I had 0 symptoms. And as I learned, it was great that I had no symptoms when I got found out, because usually when you do have symptoms, it's not good. You're in more of a later stage than not. So I think that's the other piece, is why they don't they don't go get checked.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Richard?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of it is fear, and a lack of information and mistrust in the health system. A lot of men, especially the guys that I know, their whole thing is if I don't feel anything, I'm fine, or I'd rather not know, and having that mindset can be deadly. So I think that's the reason why we put this video together, because storytelling like this matters. When people see people who look like them, whether it's an athlete like Allen Houston, or pastor like Reverend Bird, or survivors like Mitch, speaking openly about their diagnosis without shame, it chips away at that stigma, it chips away at that fear, and hopefully opens the door for action.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I just want to make one point on top of what you guys both brought up, which is the digital rectal exam, the prostate exam, which is something that a lot of men don't want to do necessarily, is really not the most important screening test. In fact, screening really is based on the blood test. It's just a blood test.
Right.
You can do it with your primary care visit. An exam might be part of it if the PSA is abnormal, but it's not really as valuable as a primary screening test. That's different, for example, for breast cancer, where women are kind of trained that a breast exam is really critical. This is more like a blood test first. So it should, I think, bring down that fear and concern that both of you are bringing up. Let's bring up a second soundbite from Reverend Malcolm Bird, pastor of the Jackson Memorial AME Zion Church in Hempstead, New York.
So when you see that smooth brother walking down Lenox Avenue, that spirit walking and accompanying that brother as he walks. And so when we encounter issues of health, for those who are deeply connected, or let's say connected to a religious community as a church or a mosque or some spiritual place of centering, I have to say to you, I've had plenty of experiences over the years when brothers will speak to me confidentially. Hey, Rev, I'm going up to see my doctors. I'm feeling a little funny. Don't tell my wife about it. There is this idea that I'm going to go, but I don't want to be vulnerable in that close family space. But I need to talk to you about it because, you know, you work for the big man upstairs.
So in case something goes
and
wrong,
they say something goes wrong.
I need some help.
Right.
I thought Reverend Bird was
Dr.
so eloquent. Go ahead. Yeah, Mitch.
Dr. I just want to let you know, Reverend Bird is actually from Mother AME Zion Church in Harlem, New York, not in Hempstead. Mother AME in Harlem.
Thank you. Thank you for correcting that. But I thought he had so many great quotes and really such an eloquent speaker, and really is counseling his congregation, but in this video, counseling the broader audience of everyone watching. So I wanted to get your thoughts about, you know, kind of what he was addressing, which is how Black men in particular may be hesitant to talk about their health issues openly, and how you think this video can kind of overcome some of those barriers. Richard?
Rich, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, you know, Reverend Bird, he brought so much heart and personality and truth to the conversation. You know, I feel like the video, you know, not only talked about cancer, it didn't just focus on cancer, it talked about a lot of different things in terms of like trust in the healthcare system, and even fear of death, generational trauma. You know, these are the things that, you know, usually we don't talk about. You know, and I look at someone like my father, you know, if something, you know, if he was feeling pain or, you know, it's a sign of weakness by showing that. So a lot of that, watching him and growing up and watching him suffer silently, you know, it kind of builds a wall, you know, but that wall could turn into something worse. You know, you might be delaying care, or, you know, by not speaking up at all could lead to something fatal. So I love that this video touches on all of those things. You know, I love hearing people say, like, you know, like, Mitch, I went through this, I'm still here, or I was scared, and I got help. That's powerful. That to me gives permission to speak. It gives permission to feel and to act.
Mitch?
Yeah, and I would also add, you know, the one thing that, you know, if you kind of listen to Reverend Bird, is that, you know, you have to find people that you trust to have these conversations with. You know, they trust him to you know, open up about, you know, what their concerns are, and you know, and you know, in the video, you know, Dr. Carpe even talks about that. You know, you have your physician, really trust them, and I do. I trust my physicians. You know, when I meet with a physician, you know, I really have good dialogue with them and really try to help them understand who I am, and then try to understand who they are, because they're there to help. And I think, you know, one of the things I think, you know, Rich talked about the history about, you know, the belief in the medical profession, and, you know, some of the things that have happened, right? You look at the Tuskegee experiment and some of the other things, and so there are some areas that Black men are very hesitant to. But I do think that, you know, we're at a point in time that we have to open up a little bit, and I think that'll also help with that dialogue, right? You know, it's okay to have a conversation and say, hey, you know what, my PSA is a little high, you know, and then it's okay to have that conversation and say, well, have you spoken to a urologist? You know, in the past, two Black men wouldn't have that conversation, but I think now, you know, we really need to, if we want to change the numbers, if we want to move the needle, right? You know, Dr. Trotman talked about, you know, given everything else even, Black men can actually do just as good or even better than their counterparts. But it's those uneven things that we have to address, and a lot of it is about conversation and communication.
Yeah, I think trust is a really important issue, but also advocating for yourself, whether it's you as the patient, seeing your doctor or the spouse or somebody, a loved one that's with that man in the office, because there's still some controversies around PSA screening. And it's really important that sometimes your primary doctor may not be aware of it. And I think that's why videos like this play such an important role, because they really give men the tool to really ask and really challenge some of the conventional wisdom about prostate cancer, which some doctors may not really understand the risk that Black men have. So can you tell me, Richard, where people who are watching this webinar can access this video and how they can share it, what you recommend for kind of taking this work and spreading this information as widely as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So the video is, we have it living on Northwell Health's YouTube page. So you can go to Northwell's YouTube page and search up The Unspoken Truth, and you can find it there. We also have it posted on the Cancer Institute, Northwell's Cancer Institute website. So that's northwell.edu/cancer. And you can watch the video there and learn a little bit about the different resources and, things that you should look out for if you're, wanting to find out more about your health and whether or not you may want to speak to your doctor.
Great. And we also posted it in the chat for everyone to be able to go directly to the video. And I highly recommend everybody watch this video. It's just a really inspiring and educational opportunity. So we're going to take a few minutes now to talk about some of the questions coming in on the chat. So I'll start with the first question, maybe to you, Mitch. What would you say are the top barriers that you've seen? We talked a little bit about it, and maybe an extension of that is, what is the first thing that people watching this video and then the webinar can really do to overcome those top barriers?
Well, I mean, again, I think the lack of knowledge is one, right? Sometimes people just don't know. And I think, depending on where you are, depending on what organization that you're associated with in terms of healthcare organization, they usually have a website. I did all of my research on ACS's website. I mean, that's, to me is a great source of information. So I do think, as the old saying is, knowledge is power. So getting yourself informed about prostate, I think, is critically important. And, I think the other issue is, really having some loved ones around to help you during your time is another barrier that I think people don't realize. It's okay to have a conversation with your spouse. It's okay to have a conversation with, your sibling. If you're about to hit that, because I think that's where, getting that support is, it's very helpful in terms of going through this journey.
And Richard, for you, one question is really about the community. How can the community help the people that they serve really in terms of awareness and really getting the word out about screening for Black men?
So what I want the community to know is, I want people to understand that your life matters, your health matters, and it's okay to speak up. This wasn't, like I said, this wasn't just a conversation about cancer. This is about prioritizing your wellness, breaking the silence and challenging stigma. So I want people, especially Black men who are watching this, to feel seen, to feel heard, and take the next step. Talk to your doctor, get screened. Or simply just open up to someone, a loved one. And I hope caregivers, allies, and family members who are watching this also recognize the role that they play in supporting those conversations. But at the end of the day, this is all about saving lives. If this video helps one person, have a conversation with their doctor, I think that, this video will inspire others as well. So.
Well, thank you. There is a question that I think, oh, go ahead, Mitch.
No, I was going to add to that, I think, one of the things is that we have Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in September. I think that's a great opportunity for people and communities to come together, we participate in the Harlem Walk, but there's also Queens Walk. There's all these different areas. One way the community can work together is to advocate a walk. You pick a route, and as a community, you go there, and then as you see men, black men there, you ask them, hey, have you checked your prostate today? Do you know your PSA number? Know your numbers. And we have a chant that when we do the walk, we say, know your numbers. That's critical. And I think that's where a community can really come together, is advocating together and using an opportunity like a prostate walk to bring the community together to address the issue.
Yeah, we're going to put some of the links to those walks and those events in the chat. So please participate and block them on your calendar. There was a question about what younger men can do to protect their prostate health and prostate risk into the future. So maybe I'll take that one, because there is confusion a little bit about when men should get their first screening. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force is the official government recommended guidelines, and they typically say to start screening around age 55 to 70. But for Black men, they recommend earlier screening. And recently, we led an evidence-based assessment of this, and for the Prostate Cancer Foundation, and we suggested that Black men should probably get their first PSA between the ages of 40 and 45, given the much higher risk and the fact that Black men may actually get prostate cancer earlier in their lives. So once you turn around 40, I think it's reasonable to start talking to your doctor about at least getting your first PSA test. Just a blood test, as we said, that's what screening really is. And then consider annual testing thereafter, depending on the results. But it's something that you really should talk to your doctor about. So I think we're coming up close to time. These are great questions. And what I want to do is point out again these prostate cancer walks. This fall, we have one during Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in September, another panel discussion in Harlem on September 5th that was mentioned, as well as several prostate cancer walks on the 6th as well in Queens on September 5th, 13th, plus a Run for Dad prostate cancer event in New Jersey that's also in the chat. So please, make a note of it and plan to come out for those events. So I want to just give you each a chance to kind of say some last comments around both your video and what message you want to get to the audience. Let's start with you, Mitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing is for those who are listening, if you're a male, 40 and older, start getting your PSA checked. If you're related to or in any other way as to a male 40 and older, talk to them about getting their PSA check. I mean, the key thing is early detection. You cannot wait until you get a symptom. You may be too late by that time, and it's really unfortunate because with all the advances that we have in treating prostate cancer, once you're able to detect it early enough, you can have a long and fruitful life. And as like my doctor says, I still want to walk my girls down the aisle, and so having that early detection now gives me a better chance of doing that.
We're so happy to hear that story, your personal story, and thank you so much for sharing it. And Richard?
Yeah, the same thing I would add is, just early detection is key. Talk to someone, talk to a loved one, talk to someone that you trust, let them know how you're feeling. It's important to be able to open up to someone and be vulnerable and, try to break the stigma. My father's a prostate cancer survivor, and, I know he went through a lot during his treatment, but thank God that he's still here with us. But, again, I stress early detection, speak to someone, and go get checked out.
Well, I really want to thank both of you, both for making this video and sharing it with the world. We're seeing a lot of wonderful comments from the audience about how impactful and important it is. And we want, American Cancer Society certainly wants, and we all want for this to be shared as broadly as possible and getting the word to the right people in the community. So thank you again. It was a real pleasure to speak to you both today, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.